Hey everyone, welcome to Let's Debate. I'm Sweet Pea and this is Sparrow and co-host is Let's Fam. Sorry, I'm nervous. This is the first time I'm doing this. We'll be your moderators for this debate. Our topic tonight is social democracy can fix capitalism. This promises to be an excellent debate. We have Void arguing that social democracy can fix capitalism. On the other side, we have P Barnz bringing the opposition. We will be having up to 10 minutes opening per side and 60 minutes of opening dialogue and a short closing statement followed by audience questions. Please remember to tag us moderators or the Let's Farm account with your questions. Remember to please hit the thumb up and subscribe to us for more brilliant content. Little reminder, please attack the arguments, not our guest speakers. We would appreciate that. Now, since you're not here to listen to me muck this up completely, Void will be going first. Void, the mic is all yours.
Okay, thank you. Hello, my name is Dmitry. So we have this debate today because I stand against ideas of classical Marxism and ideas of revolutionary abolishment of capitalism and things like that. I believe there are self-sustainable kinds of capitalistic systems which can provide opportunities for personal growth and self-fulfillment. Meanwhile, my opponent claims that in a capitalistic system, a smaller group of people controls basic needs of existence, and a person will be rejected with these basic needs if they disagree with their labor be converted into somebody else's wealth. So let me clarify my position. The main trait of capitalism is obviously private means of production and their operation for profit. And at least in middle term, it would be unwise to abolish this private ownership of the means of production. Instead, in a proper democracy, we can gradually solve social problems through political means. And in a long term, the society might even organically evolve into a system where private ownership of the means of the production disappeared as a result of series of small changes. Second thing, I do not think that capitalism per se solves all the problems. Capitalism is a useful tool to optimize the production of goods and the positive impact. But it is very ineffective to handle negative impacts like opioid addiction, climate change, various pollutions, and things like that. So I think that at the current stage of human civilization, capitalism is a crucial tool we can use to keep positive impact high, but also we should apply other mechanisms to minimize the negative impact. In other words, we should not abolish capitalism, but should also not rely on it alone. And this will remain, and this will remain that way until we reach post scarcity or a better economic system will be invented. We can see examples of prosperous systems in full democracies already right now. People are not only provided with basic needs there for existence and growth, but they are also represented in the government and are appreciated in a generous capitalistic way when they suddenly do something useful. So it is much more promising to build parliamentary republic, human rights institutions, and all that, rather than complaining about wealthy people. And by the way, about the wealthy people, in the conversation which led to this debate, my opponent explained their position at some point in the form of an anecdote. The anecdote is 3 people walk into a room with a table filled with 1,000 cookies, a businessman, a worker from the majority community, and a worker from a minority community. And the businessman immediately grabs 999 of the cookies and turns to the member of the majority community and says, "Look out, the minority is going to steal your cookie." I want to emphasize that this way of thinking contains a fundamental mistake. A lot of socialists claims that wealthy people consume the most of the resources of the planet, like cookies in this anecdote. But this simply is not true. For example, one human single-handedly cannot possibly consume 1 billion kilograms of food each day. This is not how it works. What actually happens is when a person is successful in using resources to create even more resources demanded by others, they get to manage more resources. But manage doesn't mean consume. Basically, all the money of wealthy people is mostly invested into various companies, which creates jobs and goods for consumption by somebody else. I do not want to say that they're good or bad people, and I think society may do a better job of redistributing ultra wealth. But this is not a problem of capitalism per se. This is a problem of the specific political system and political preferences of the society. And when we have a super presidential system which polarizes the society to capitalist abolitionists and ruthless ultra capitalists without checks and balances, then neither social group can achieve any good. So I propose to use the best practices of building a democratic political system and make this system to solve social problems. With time, we will automate more and more work. And who knows, maybe we will reach post-scarcity and there will be no deficit of basic needs at all, and all this conversation will become obsolete. Yeah, that's basically it. Yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your opening statement, Void. And we will now turn to P Barnz for his opening. Take it away, P Barnz. The mic is all yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sweet Pea and Sparrow, for moderating today. And thanks so much, Void, for having what is, I think, going to be a really, really interesting conversation. For those in the audience, don't suspect this to be the leftist dumpster fire that you're probably hoping for. I think that Void and I are probably going to agree on a lot of the outcomes. Okay, so what we're trying to achieve, I think, is largely going to be the same. I don't want to speak for him, but I think that we probably both believe in social welfare, in making sure that there's adequate safety nets there for people, so that people have a basic standard of living. Where we're going to disagree on is that capitalism is a means that we can use and we can control and we can put some form of shackles on to get there. Because I'd like to put forward the argument that while social democracy is a very good system, if you were to bring in a socially democratic system or some of the tenets of social democracy into the US system, for example, millions of people's lives would be benefited overnight through. There would be some very simple things around healthcare and better social safety nets, forcing those in the hospitality industry to actually pay a basic wage to people and not rely on consumers to pay their wages. And there's a simple reason why I believe that capitalism needs to be overcome for permanent solutions to a lot of these social issues. It's for one simple reason: it's the motive. Under capitalism, the line must go up. Many of the KPIs of how governments and economies are graded are based on growth. It's the minimum figures. We call recession 2 periods of retraction within an economic system. The line has to continue to go up at all times. Otherwise, capital will move, capital will fly. All economies that continue with what is now a heavily bandaged capitalist experiment need to continue to give reverence to capital. And that means playing by the rules of international capitalism. The ultra rich are allowed to continue to hoard excess labor of the working classes. They continue to monopolize the means of production, and they continue to commodify the basic needs for existence. Now, I'd like to take this opportunity to go off script a little bit and thank Void for stealing my anecdote. I was going to actually use that in my opening, and I think that was a very sneaky tactic. But I think he missed one of the major points of the anecdote. It's not that the capitalist is stealing the cookies for his own consumption. He is hoarding the cookies to use as a means to extract labor from the rest of the people. And the main anecdote was the fact that the way that modern capitalism works, especially within American systems and within two-party systems, is while the businesses, as businesses do with things that are called pink washing and greenwashing, which are quite disputed terms, While the bourgeois will continue to capitalize on the popular social issues of the day, we've seen that with Bud Light recently, and the fact that after having a small downturn, Bud Light share prices are on the way up again. While the bourgeois will try to capitalize on those popular social issues, on the other side, politics will always create an other as a scare campaign, and we know that these tactics are used to keep people within a capitalist system, to trust business owners and to trust big business to help us and to solve all of our issues. But yes, thank you again for stealing the anecdote, Boyd. And Boyd talked a lot about political systems and using political systems, and this is the main difference between a socialist system and social democracy, is the belief that for a sustained that the concept of more ethically leaning left-wing governments maintaining some level of democratic control over a political system while going through the normal 4 or 5 year cycles is sustainable long term. This is where the contention is, okay? Because eventually capitalism will fight back. Basically, what we're doing is we're putting the trust of our economic system in the hands of a small number of people, most of which were never voted into their positions. They didn't get there by merit. They were born into this wealth in a lot of situations that we're seeing these days. So the final decision as to what happens to the availability of capital within a system is in the hands of an insanely small number of people, right? A single tantrum from a wealthy business owner can affect hundreds of people, and we've seen examples of that around the world, even in modern times of capital strike and capital flight, when circumstances don't lend themselves to that line continuously moving up. To give some international examples of this, I think the best one is Francois Mitterrand's France. Francois Mitterrand was voted into France with an overwhelming majority, even with the backing of the French Communist Party. He raised minimum wages, he nationalised monopolised industries, he raised pensions, he built high-speed rail. Within 2 years, he was winding back most of that because of capital flight. Businesses left. Businesses refused to continue to employ people. Public spending was cut. And industries were put back into private hands. Sweden, which is often, and look, don't get me wrong, the standard of living continues to remain high in Scandinavian countries, but Sweden since 2017 has had to make some pretty severe cutbacks on the things that those who promote social democracy around the world point to Sweden as a glowing example of where it works. Sweden have had to reduce employment benefits. They've cut taxes. They've canned the inheritance tax. In 2002, the top 1% within Sweden held 18% of the country's wealth. By 2017, that was 47% and rising. So 1% of the population now hold 47% of the private wealth within Sweden. Almost a third of Sweden's population have no wealth to speak of, only net debt. Okay. So, and the last thing that we probably won't get to talk about a lot, but the fact that for social democracy to maintain the standard of living within the country that employs it, someone needs to get screwed, right? Capitalism cannot exist without someone being exploited. For workers' rights and for workers' conditions to be maintained and raised within the country employing the social democracy, the global south generally has to suffer for that. And we can see that in examples of H&M, IKEA, and other businesses that are run within social democracies that still have to screw someone around the world. So yeah, my case is the line needs to continue to go up. While I think it's a positive that there are people around the world that would like to put some sort of shackles on capitalism to try to use it to work towards a common goal. It's far too fragile, and it still allows for people to hoard excess labor and hoard wealth well beyond their means. Maybe 100 years ago, before the situation we found ourselves in now, we could start looking to social democracy. But with climate change, with other international factors, and wars that are going on within the world, plus the fact we saw during the pandemic the increase in wealth that was taken by a very, very select few while the rest of the world suffer. Capitalism just doesn't have any appetite. Capitalism just doesn't have any appetite to play nice, and it will always fight back. So yeah, looking forward to the open discussion.
Thank you, P Barnz, for your opening. We will now move into the open dialogue, where our debaters will have up to 1 hour to cross-examine each other. P Barnz Void, please take it away.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for the opening speech. So, of course, this is like infinite topic. We can discuss hours and hours, but to keep it focused, it feels like main two things we want to touch. Is it possible to have good capitalism? And you are saying, as you already said, this is one of the contention, basically. And I'm saying it's kind of possible. You are saying is not. And second is, would it be worse if we stick with that capitalism than having socialism, as, for example, Marx says, or somebody else nowadays, or I don't know. So on the first thing, you mentioned Sweden, but in Sweden, people live pretty well despite the things you said. So again, like we have this different, feel free to stop me if I speak first.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I
okay.
spoke for ages. You go.
I just feel guilty a bit, but okay. So I feel like we have a difference in one important thing. You think that if a tiny group owns the most of the wealth, then other people suffer. I don't think that's true. I think that if somebody owns this wealth, then they can manage how things work in the world. But it doesn't mean that other people are suffering. Moreover, if they manage that badly, then they lose this wealth, and basically this is self-healing system in that sense. Of course, if capitalistic system has no balances and checks, then you have this ugly situation when people have no choice but to agree on bad agreement, because otherwise they won't survive. And I'm saying you can solve this problem by just providing this basic minimum through political system and wealth redistribution by government. And then people have free choice, and that's basically the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. And look, I agree that the rich should be taxed a hell of a lot more. And that's the main means by which you do redistribute that wealth. But one of the things that I guess I disagree on is that government institutes that change and government takes that money. It's not taken, it's granted by capitalism. The problem is the key still the key bargaining chip and the most important thing within a social democracy is capital, because it is that capital that you need to use to instill that social change. And that is where there is unequal bargaining power, and that's where I'm saying that it's not sustainable long term. What will generally happen, like in the case of France, and France is still reeling from a lot of this. We've seen France right now. They're trying to put the age up of retirement by 2 years, and they're going nuts because they still remember from the 80s austerity, and I think this was one of the first times the term of austerity was coined, right? Basically a politician conceding, hey, I tried this great new system, it's stuffed up, I couldn't rein in the capitalists, and now they're fighting back. So I agree that in a short term, if an ethical government gets in that wants to see some sort of reform within the social landscape, They can make small changes, but these changes are granted by the capitalist class. They're not taken, right? And if capital wants to, it can move on. I think where's another example I had here? 1978, Cleveland, Ohio, banks that were actually financing Cleveland and a lot of the social systems that Cleveland had in place. They actually called on debt and they refused to roll over the debt. They refused to, they love to say, raise the debt ceiling. So the banks refused to raise the debt ceiling within Cleveland, Ohio, because Cleveland refused to sell its electricity grid to a conglomerate of banks. Now, electricity grids I think it's a pretty good litmus test of how a country's going as to whether it has to sell its electricity grid off to private interests. And yeah, sorry, go on.
No. I find it a bit funny that you mentioned France, because in my opening speech, I specifically emphasized that I believe, not like believe, but from my experience, I see that the most democratic systems are parliamentary republics, while, if I remember correctly, France is presidential republic and US is presidential republic. This is why this is one of the major reasons why United States is not on the top of democracy index, and this is one of the major reasons why you have this polarization and this populistic movements on social problems. If you had a good parliament and if people were free to be elected into government, like, for example, right here in Ireland, where I live, you don't need money to be elected. You just go you don't need, so you just start small from like your local neighborhood. You just by your own go through each door and say to vote for you. When you win locally, you can then go for like larger areas. When you have some support here, you can get more support somewhere else, and so on. So in my opinion, everything you just said is a problem of presidential systems.
Okay. Now, I want to be charitable, but do you really think that there are? Because this was another thing that I thought would be good to discuss, and yes, I was hoping that we would get onto the political side of things, because another reason that I feel that capitalism is always going to be a force that needs to be fought against when it comes to getting some sort of getting social justice within a country is fighting against that political system. Now, yeah, you can go and do a letterbox drop amongst your neighbors and say, hey, vote for me. But don't you think that those with capital and those with money obviously have a significantly unfair advantage of their voices being heard?
No, because if you have somebody with money but without good jobs, good. My English is not good. Good.
That's okay.
Good work done in this neighborhood. Nobody knows you. Even with money, even with all these ads, nobody vote for you, because who are you? Where are you from?
Having goodwill within the neighborhood, I think, is what you're talking about, right? They've gone around, they've done the grassroots efforts, they're part of the community. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, and okay, if we go larger, of course there is advantage on having money. But again, if you have a parliamentary republic, and like full democracy, you usually have laws which enforces more equal game to play in politics. So you have equal time on television because of these laws, not because of your money. You have other restrictions which equalize you with other people. So no, basically it depends on political system which people enforced in their country.
Mm-hmm. Do you have an example of? Would you? Because I just look at us. I look at Australia as well, and look.
Okay.
Australia is becoming just as bad as the US and other countries when it comes to wealth. We have far better safety nets. We have universal health care. which I think alleviates a lot of the problems and is one of the main differences between us and America. But we have a representative democracy, right? Which is I understand a system that you would probably say is a better system, or a system that, would that be right?
To my shame, do not know much about political system in Australia. I'm much more interested in Europe, but
Yeah.
from far indexes I looked at Australia, it kind of looked so good, but there is a bad sign about Australia, if I remember correctly. You have very low amount of parties, so basically you have like these politicians who long time in this system, and they do not allow other to get into your political system, which is
Absolutely. Well,
uh,
it's starting to improve. The Greens Party and other sort of independents are starting to hold balance of power. So in a lot of in some states and territories, the major parties do need to agree or give concessions to third parties who are usually more left leaning in the majority. They have to give concessions to those third parties. But yeah, it is a two-party preferred system. And the problem is, because of the fact that the main KPIs as to how well a government does is how quickly they can push the line up and how consistently they can push the line up. Both of them have essentially become the same, right? We've got our right wing party that's a little bit more racist, right, and we've got our left wing party that has more it's more of it's more promotion of workers' unions, right? But in a lot of instances, even the union movement are still doing things that are quite harmful to the economy. And a lot of the collective bargaining doesn't go as well as it should within Australia. But it's really this sort of neoliberal capitalist state. I mean, right now, most of our major arterial roads in Sydney, in the city that I live, they're owned by private companies, and they're owned and run by private companies. What we do is we take money from the rich, and we go, okay, we'll tax, but not too much, because money will move elsewhere. And then we just throw it at capitalists, and we go, well, hopefully they'll build a road, right? Roads the infrastructure only ends up getting built where businesses want it, right? So there's a great big toll road. You can spend probably $50 getting from one end of it to the other, from Western Sydney into the center of Sydney, to funnel people in to give their labor up, right? So I think that I do you have an example of a political system that's working, that has because my concern still remains that regardless of the political system, right? Because whatever political system and the control that you have allows you to legislate within that country. What legislation would you build in to prevent capital strike and prevent capital flight, and to try to control what? Because remember, capitalism, its only goal is profit. That's its goal. That's it, right? How do you, within a political system, give them that goal while trying to institute things that are antithetical to that role, which is improved working conditions, less working hours, and all of the things that we want within social democracy? How do you? Because to me, those two things still seem juxtaposed.
Okay. Before the main answer, just a side mark about capitalism is just about profit. I want. I think it's not that simple. Yes, of course, like the whole idea is that you have private ownership of whatever you want and you make profit. I agree here. But in the end of the day, it is being ran by people. And people are not only about money. People need money so far like their needs are satisfied. For example, I don't know, like... like a lot of people can decide not to go to a job with more money because it contradicts their moral beliefs or like work conditions or whatnot. So it's not only about money. And when you do start business, you also may have some ideology about why this business exists. But okay, this is like arguable. I'm not going to have strong opinion on that. It's just a small remark. As for in which countries do we have something good already? For me, a good sign that a country has a healthy political system if it has a lot of political parties and they are easy to be created and like disappear. Of course, this is not the only one criteria, but this is like very rare thing which shows pretty good how free democracy actually is in this country. And from this point of view, I like Scandinavian countries and I like Ireland in which I live, because even if we talk about even Netherlands, I remember recently, or maybe it was Denmark, I don't remember, they had a case where farmers were suddenly unhappy with something, I forgot what exactly. And suddenly the party of farmers became one of the major political forces in the country. Just because it is easy to create a party, for party it's easy to explain what they are, and for people it's easy to decide what they want right now. So I guess if you have country with filters, I don't know if Australia is one of those, but more filters you have to get into politics, the like less democratic country that is. So like Scandinavia, Ireland, something like that.
Yeah, I think in Australia you just need to show that you have so many members, and then you can register a political party. You just need to
How
show you
many?
have it. I think it's something small, like I think it's only a couple of hundred people that you need to, but anyone can run as an independent. So you don't actually need to be party affiliated. You can run you can run state, federal, local. You can run as an independent. You can run as an independent member of parliament. We do have a few independent members of parliament. They tend to be on the affluent side, though.
So could you help me to understand why then you have the same parties over and over again through all elections? From what I see, of course, I don't know much about Australia.
Because one side has the backing of the capitalists and the other side has the backing of the workers. It's still, and this is, and with what you were saying about the profit motive, I agree. For the proletariat, it isn't a profit motive; it's survival, right? It's ensuring that enough of your life is spent manipulating your local means and your local environment through working, through substituting some of your labor to buy the basic means for existence. For the proletariat, the name of the game is survival. For the bourgeois class, the name of the game is profit, right? So when I'm saying capitalism has a profit motive, I'm talking about the class, the class that retains the capital and the class that retains the means of production. That's where I'm saying that the profit motive lies. Yeah, of course, people and individuals within a capitalist system can make their own, within a degree, they can make their own individual decisions as to where they work and what they do. But in the end of the day, you must work to survive, right? You must, in some way, within a lot of capitalist countries, you need to exchange your labor in some form for your basic survival, for your existence, even for housing. There's a major housing crisis going on in Australia at the moment. Rents are just going insane. The modern means of production is the rental property, is the investment property, right? We have in many countries, I know Australia's no different, there are more empty investment properties in Sydney than there are homeless, which for my mind is just it's just insanity that that's something that we've allowed to exist, that there are roofs that we've built, we've spent money to build these homes, yet there are people that are living on the streets when they're in need. It just, that's a side topic, but it just blows my mind that something like that's allowed to exist within a system. More parties, yeah, and look, it's great that in certain areas or in certain countries being able to be heard and be represented is a lot easier than others. I think there are still hamstrings to it, and wouldn't more political parties mean there's more infighting, mean there's more fighting within the political system as to who holds power, while the capitalist is still allowed to steal the cookies?
So you said like one party represents capital, another party represents proletariat. I'm curious, like proletariat is very different. There are farmers, there are like, I don't know, art people, there are like industry workers.
The service industry as well is certainly something that didn't exist when Marx did a lot of his writings as well, and it's kind of hard to apply to the service industry. But sorry, go on.
Yeah, and so I see that in European countries with healthy political system, there it suddenly appears parties which represents, for example, like farmers. Why don't you have such phenomena in Australia?
Look,
what do you think?
we do, but the way that farming has ended up, so our left wing or our right wing party, it's actually a coalition between the Liberal Party, which is your wealthy city capitalists, and the Nationals, which are your farming and country interests. I don't have the exact figures on it, but I think you'll find that farming is heavily industrialized within Australia. We supply most of our, when you look at, I used to work with a dude who exported fruit. The best of our produce is usually sent overseas, and it's usually sent to export markets. What remains ends up within Australia. We import some of our produce as well, and they have to compete with those international exports. But yeah, farmers are more represented from the capitalist side of politics, because let's face, like the best example I can give is the dairy industry within Australia, which I do know something about, right? So we have two major supermarket chains here in Australia. We have Woolworths and we have Coles. They own everything. They bought up all of the bottle shops, or what you might know as an off license. They've systematically bought a lot of the service stations, so a lot of the petrol stations, so that they can put their Woolworths Express or Coles Express within them. They bought a lot of pubs, because a lot of pubs have bottle shop licenses next to them. They both competed with each other on the price of milk, and they eventually brought milk down to $1 a litre. So you could go in, you could buy 2 litres of milk for $2, right? Nowhere can compete. Your local corner shop normally has to sell that for around $4, $5 these days for 2 litres of milk. When you actually go to a dairy, it costs $1 a litre to pasteurize milk, and it costs $1 a litre to extract the milk from the cow. Right? These things are sold at a loss. And if Coles and Woolworths want to drop the price that they pay for a litre of pasteurized milk, they can and they will, because there's really only one or two distributors. So much of our farming class has become subservient and is in exactly the same boat as they're in the shit with the rest of us now.
Okay.
Sorry, I said
okay.
a lot.
No, that's good. I just genuinely don't know much about Australia, so I just cannot debate on this ground, unfortunately.
But anyway, sorry, because I got into the anecdote. Where were you going with the? Were you saying that there's some sort of differential between? Because you were saying I think the point you were trying to make was that I may have missed was that are farmers part of the proletariat, or where do they sit within that class or that political struggle?
Sorry, say again. The last thing I missed a second.
Where they sit within that political strata. Is that what you were saying? You brought up the example of farmers for a reason, I'm assuming, that they don't sit traditionally within the proletariat, or what was the point that you were trying to make?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out why you don't have so much the diversity of political parties and all that. It looks like you have some kind of filters in your political systems, and people have to align with existing political parties, which are led by some never-changing people, and this makes your political system stagnates. That's what I hear from what you say. Maybe that's completely wrong, but that's how it feels.
Absolutely.
And I'm saying it's not always the case. We have real life examples where it's not the case, and political parties appears and disappears and suddenly capture the power. Usually, from what I saw, like there are few differentiations. First, is power centralized or not? Usually, parties are easy to appear and get power if power is not centralized. Is media controlled by like a small amount of people? If so, then it's usually difficult to fight for fair election processes and things like that. What was the third? I forgot. Yeah. Are there any filters? I think I said. Okay, I forgot what is the third.
And look, I think there's always going to be filters, and I think a lot of those filters are going to be financial. Within a lot of political systems, the media, and yeah, I didn't bring up the media in my opening because I could go on for hours about the poor state of the media system. You probably see me ranting a lot about Rupert Murdoch, and I'm loving what is being done to him, and I'm loving the fact that the Dominion case hopefully will rein in and make people see at how much of a scourge Fox News is on the international landscape. To give a bit of background on that, Rupert Murdoch's been involved with an Australian news media since long before he bought Fox, and continued its missive of promoting conservative politics within America. And he was doing exactly the same thing here. A lot of the social turmoil that we saw in the 90s around immigration was really started, and he fanned the flames through his news media. In Queensland for a while, which is the state up north from where I am, they really only had one news source for a time. The more left-leaning Herald moved, or the more left-leaning Fairfax Press moved out of certain areas. So all you had was two newspapers, and they were both run by the right side of politics. And I think that in the media, especially within the US and also within Australia, you've got these media interests that whose sole ambition is to create better tax situations for their owners, which is essentially what it is. Like, sorry, go on.
No, it's fine. It's so the problem is you're talking about Australia, US, and I'm talking about Europe. we need to somehow converge. So
you don't think US politics has an influence on Europe?
I think it does have influence, but I don't think it defines politics in Europe. I see that in Ireland, people very free to choose how they want to live, and while they want to live in a social country, they will live in a social country. Nobody can change that. When they will suddenly decide to go right wing, then democracy could be lost forever, of course. But of course, this will never happen.
But this is what I mean, and this is where my point is. I agree that social, and like I said in my opening, if you were to just bring in universal healthcare, right, within the American system, can you imagine how many millions of people's lives would be benefited, right? But it's unstable, and as we saw with Obama trying to do that, as crappy as Obamacare was in a lot of ways, and as deliberately unsustainable as Obamacare was, a lot of these things have to go through political cycles. And I think it like in Australia, it's really only through the will of the people that a lot of the things that they're trying to do in the US don't happen here, right? I think that it would be a very, very brave government that tried to get rid or wind back universal healthcare, even though the Liberal National Party, the right wing, do try to wind back a lot of Medicare spending, Medicare being our safety net. I think that it's relying on capitalism, because let's face it, I think we're both sort of conceding here that to and fro, and that left to right, going from interest to interest, the capital doesn't need to do anything. All it needs to do is it either needs to ride out a left-wing phase of government where the will of the people takes over, and we go, hey, we're going to take some of that money back and we're actually going to use it to better people, until it swings back into the right, until capital slowly starts to remove investment, and then the right-wing parties can go, hey, these policies, and we're paying the poor too much, and dole bludgers, as people like to call them in Australia, people who live off the safety net. We're taxing the rich too much. They're leaving the country, and basically they're going on a capital strike. So to reduce that, to reduce unemployment, things swing back in the other direction. So that's my contention. It's too unstable. I agree that social democracy is a good thing, but it's too unstable to rely on long term. When we're talking about people being given the basic dignity of being able to exist, right? And the problem still remains is everything's commodified. Everything I need to survive, my basic existence, is now on the reliance of the capital class.
So you say it's unstable, and you said like people who have money, they have like advantage over people who have no money to play it into politics. In some countries, so what is happening? I will just continue the thing I started a few minutes ago. When you start locally and you get you win some local elections, in some countries you get government support for further political activity after that. And you use this money to kind of counteract any capital can be against you on your scale, because larger your scale is, larger financial support of you is. And you usually have like you are usually supported with bare minimum to to show yourself to the people. So if you have merits, you should win somebody with money, but without merits. Again, it boils down to how political system work. One more thing I don't like, for example, in the US is not only the presidential, no, it's not only in the US, not only very presidential constitution, but also quite centralized power. I mean, there is federal government which has too much power. For example, I kind of like something like if you take European Union and okay, European Union is too loose, but if you get something like in between European Union and the US in terms of how you federalize things, then you get so good balance. For example, again, in Ireland, there are only 5 million people. There is no much political struggle relatively to the US to win local elections. And people whoever wins here decides how people live here. And the European Union doesn't really influence that much. It only creates bottom, low bar of how things should work, like
it's
standards
it's a minimum standard, right?
Yeah, kind of like how food should be checked. Also, European Union has a lot of things like free trade, of course, free movement and things like that. But I mean, if we talk about bad things like losing sovereignty, then European Union doesn't really get too much sovereignty from you in the contrast to the US. And I imagine to the Australia as well, how federation works there.
I do like the fact that the European Union was able to push back against Apple when it comes to e-waste. So the court, I believe that Apple lost and are now having to have a USB-C standard for all of their mobile phones without this ridiculous situation where Apple can have a new charger for every upgrade of their phone. So yeah, apparently the Apple have had to concede. I'm sure they'll be able to come up with something that will. From my understanding, the concession that or what Apple have done is they've ensured that it's only Apple chargers that will charge properly. If you use any other USB-C, it's still going to be a slow charge. But they've managed to. The European Union, in its interest of actually reducing e-waste, have actually had a win against Apple, which I thought, okay, yeah, good on the European Union. That's pretty based.
Yeah, there was like a year ago, I think, another interesting example when small 5 million Ireland forced the whole Facebook, the whole Meta, to change how they process personal data, if I remember correctly, which is kind of fun. Like, yeah, so they process personal data in the whole world. I don't remember details actually, so disregard me.
Good.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, so about too unstable. To me, it feels like overall, actually, like at least Europe, I don't know how about Australia and the United States, actually on long-term goes left. So there are fluctuations to right. Like right now, for example, there is an era of right populists, I guess, across the whole world. But
Italy.
if we took at scale of like 30 years or things like that, then there is a pretty obvious trend towards left. And because of that, I don't think that right populists will be able to destroy social democracy here in the European Union. I think the opposite. I think it will evolve leftier and leftier right until there will be no need to do these discussions, because maybe we will reach post-scarcity, as I said in the opening statement. So why do you think that is not possible?
Well, I guess for two reasons. I think it's possible. And yeah, I think sitting around and waiting for, I guess, moral progress on these sorts of things. And you're right. Even if you look at the if you look at what's going on, I've been following closely what's been going on in Tennessee with their state electorates, and it's led and the two young black men that were kicked out of parliament there, and looking at just the grassroots support and the support from the youth that they had. I think in the 2022 midterms, there's certain younger age groups that are like 70 to 80% are voting Democrat at the moment. And while I wouldn't exactly consider Democrats to be left leaning, all of them, I think that a lot of them are just as bad as the Republicans, just without the racism and without the bigotry. There's still a lot of corporate interests that run very, very deep within the DNA of the Democrat Party. I think, do you think that, and I'm going to get really morbid here, given that the IPCC report says that we need to cut emissions by 50% by 2030, and if we do cut emissions by 50% by 2030, we really only reduce the chances of avoiding 2 degrees of change, which is kind of the point where we say things really start to go to shit. Do you think we have long enough to allow baby boomers to die, basically? Do you think we have time? That's a whole. I know. I'm opening a big can of worms right on the hour point. But my contention with that is I don't think we have time. To be honest, I don't think we have time to. Yes, if we sit back and wait, will we get ourselves into a system where the left wing, or at least what'll happen is, like has happened in the past, what is left wing and what is right wing will shift. There'll still be a divide, but the middle line will keep moving to the left as it has.
Yeah, I agree. So you're saying we have no time to like fix climate change, pollution, all that. Have I heard you correctly?
Well, yeah, I don't think sitting back and waiting for demographics to
Okay.
fix and to stabilize. I don't think it will stabilize. It will just continue to shift what left and right is, and it will just continue to the battle line will continue to move left slowly. And second of all, I don't think we have time when forget the climate change side of it because it's probably too much considering we're right on the hour. But I don't think that just sitting back and waiting. I think that the line will just continue to move. It will continue to be unstable, but the line will just continue to move to the left.
Yeah, I agree. The middle line will, I think, continue to move to the left. What, just to reemphasize, what I don't like when you have political systems which are polarized, like in the US. I like when you have smooth representation of everybody who participate in, like in this country. As for sit back and relax, yeah, that doesn't work that way in my mind. I'm from Russia, and we basically lost democracy, and that's what happens when you just wait and relax. So democracy should be earned. It is something you should fight for. When you see that your basic democratic values are broken, you need to fight back while you still have power to do so. For example, if media goes away, then you already lost. Democracy will degrade in the next 10 years for sure, like Russia demonstrates. So if media is oppressed, you need to fight back. Okay. As for climate change, yeah, that's a long topic. I would gladly debate this. Yeah, by the way,
I think we still have some time. We can scratch the surface on it. I guess my contention when it comes to climate change on this debate is, as we've seen thus far, I mean, if you look at petrochemicals within the pandemic, we're talking bumper profits, right? The as the political landscape and as the political appetite to actually make some meaningful change within these areas, the capitalist classes continue to just it just continues to get worse, and they don't seem to show, there doesn't seem to be any appetite to make the meaningful changes that we need to. And also the media are well and truly, there was a US study done recently that showed our very own Sky News Australia was the world's largest disseminator of climate misinformation in the world. Again, that's owned by Murdoch. That's owned by Fox. By Murdoch, by Fox.
I see. About climate change, I would say that Europe does very good success. For example, if I remember correctly, a few years ago when I was looking into it, it was 23 or 25% of the whole electricity already green energy, and it got from about zero for like I may be very broken numbers here.
I think Germany's up in the I think Germany's up in the 40s now when it comes to renewable sources.
Yeah, this is one thing I wanted to also say right now. So okay, let me switch to it right away. So ironically, in Germany, the nuclear power was shut down by basically Green Party, which I understand is kind of left. So among left, there are problems. But the rest of the Europe is still going forward. For example, if you to get the same Sweden, again, I forgot numbers, but it was impressive. I don't remember, like 40% or something like that. I just don't remember numbers, sorry. They also have waste utilization around 100%, but it includes burning waste, which is not really fair. No, Europe can go forward despite capitalism. Again, in my opinion, because you have good representation of people in the parliament. And about, is it too late for climate change? It feels like we are on the borderline too late, but it's not yet. It looks like we have progress, and if we continue to make the same amount of progress further, then we will avoid very drastic catastrophe. But I hope, yeah, we will not stop. I want to ask Sweetie, do we have time? I have another big topic which we haven't discussed. I was also curious to discuss a comparison of possible socialist systems to what we have in Europe.
Yeah, we have 15 minutes left.
Did we want to do that in a round two? I've enjoyed the discussion. Did we want to do can Marxism fix capitalism for a second time?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
Because I think for the last 15 minutes you mentioned at the end, and look, this will really be you teaching me on this one because I haven't researched a lot. But you talked about post scarcity, and I think it was it was sort of in the context of post scarcity in the context of, I guess, AI and other sort of systems that are being brought in. Did you want to expand on that a little bit? Because that did pique my interest. Because I've read some on post scarcity. Some people think it's a pipe dream. Some people think it's coming. Think it's sort of something that's achievable.
I think that a human is a very stupid thing. It could be replaced. So whatever human does, it could be replaced. And since human can be self-sustainable, human can produce food for themselves, so they can produce whatever. It means that we can automate everything and produce as much good as needed for everybody. And we can create logistics which will deliver these goods for everybody who needs that. And if we have everything in place, like 3D printers which can print home for people for homeless people, who can print yachts and they can live in sea if they want or whatnot, we kind of, the whole contention we have right now disappears, because basically the whole problem we have, capitalism is kind of efficient to maximize production, but very inefficient to minimize harm. What I'm saying is, yeah.
So no, I'm agreeing with you. Absolutely. Go on.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is basically with time we will reduce harm to minimum organically without any revolution needed. So yeah, that's it.
For me, look, I agree with that. For me, it will entirely depend on who has ownership of this new robotic means of production. and I guess being a little bit of a cynic, I'm in one of the industries that I've been told probably every 5 years for the past 20 years. That within 5 years my job will be done by AI, and I'm still here.
Let's imagine the vast majority of jobs are replaced by AI or whatnot, but I hope gradually, not in one day, but I hope like in 10 years, for example, like minimum. You say it depends highly on who owns these means. I am saying in proper political systems where you have smooth representation of people in parliament and power is held by parliament, basically people would decide, okay, let's redistribute that. This person has too much wealth, he can provide for everybody, he will still be ultra wealthy, but like 3 times less ultra wealthy, but we all will be provided until we will find a way to requalify ourselves and be useful for the society. Because like they are majority, and if they are indeed represented, as I see in European Union, the capital will have no power over that, despite all the money for ads, because you have laws which guarantees equal representation in media when you do elections, and things like that.
Yeah, awesome. Do you want to start with a close? You went first. Do you want to start with a closing?
Closing.
Yeah,
I think that was good enough for closing.
that was good enough for your closing. Cool. And look, I do look forward to. I fear that we could go down and look. You started to give a a little bit of a hint at what I would talk about if we were doing the next topic, which is, can Marxism fix capitalism, or can Marxism replace capitalism? You went dangerously close there to talking about a system where the use of capital is decided upon democratically. So I'll leave that as a teaser for the next debate. But I've really enjoyed the discussion. Thank you. I've learned a lot. I hope you have as well.
Well,
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, P Barnz, and thank you, Void. Considering this has come to a natural closing statements, it is now time for audience questions. We will read as many as we have time for. Have we got any questions from the audience? If not, so look.
Maybe we
got
should
any
have
audience
more heated
questions?
debate.
No, got it done.
Should have yelled at each other more, you reckon?
Yeah. Like that.
I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight. We greatly appreciate it. I hope that you enjoyed the show, and our participant links are in the show description. And if you like their performance here, please consider subscribing to our channel and to their channels. Please remember to hit the like button. So you don't miss any exciting contents that we've got coming up. I do apologize. I'm extremely nervous. This is the first time that I'm hosting, so please bear with me. Again, thank you so much for coming and being here. This has been an excellent debate. I've immensely enjoyed it, and I've learned a lot. Thank you. Again, thank you for coming. Remember, let's not fight. Let's debate the topics, and let's talk about the issues. I hope you have a good night.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for hosting. Thank you for participating.
You're welcome.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Bye.